years probably in the classroom?
I did. I didn't see myself certainly being. I became a second in department, I think, in my 6th year, and then I did a sideways move to get more A-level experience. I wonder how many people would do that now. I think most people who move would probably move for promotion, or in my case, to withdraw from a leadership role as they get near the end of their career. But certainly, the idea that, okay, well, I've tried this kind of school, so I'm going to try another one before I'm ready to take on a department or something.
Rare.
But that's not part of our thinking now.
Yeah.
And of course, in those days, often an interview to become a head of department was very competitive. There were a lot of candidates. When I got my first job, there were 84 applicants for the job. I remember that statistic being told to me.
Yeah.
Now, and here we are in very favourable circumstances, and we've found it very hard to fill places of people who are leaving, including your good self.
I like being replaced by someone.
Well, you have, yes. Somebody excellent in every respect. Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Is there a reason for that? Why we're struggling to find? Because that's not just English. I know in history it's a similar issue.
Yeah.
Any idea why that?
Well, I think locally, leaving aside everything else, there's the demographic of the expense of living in London.
Yeah.
So I found in schools I've worked in, Tiffin Girls' School would be a very good example, that people come and they don't mind sharing a house or living in a bedsit or something because it's a bit of fun. They're close to London. It's like an extension of the student days. After 2 years, it occurs to them that this is very costly and is getting them nowhere.
Yeah.
And so quite young people move on because of the economic climate. Is teaching seen, we know it's not seen by graduates as a sort of magnet profession. The one school, Sutton Grammar, where they seem to never have any problem at all filling places, and it never seemed to occur to them that it would be a problem, they had a heavy reliance on a sort of old boy network.
Right.
And it seemed to work.
Yeah.
But most schools don't have that. And in some ways, I'm a bit dubious about the ethics of that in some ways.
Yeah.
If you have a school with as that one does, with a Masonic tradition, for example, I'm flatly opposed to that.
Yeah.
But okay, why do we find it? I just think, to be honest, I've known people keen to teach their subject, people perhaps who are looking to change career, and then they get hit, as I alluded to earlier, with the teacher standards, with the fact that so much of the PGCE doesn't appear to be about honing teaching skills, but they don't go on with it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the problem really for the profession.
Yeah, it is.
It's a retention issue for the profession.
I think there needs to be a whole new thought about what are we looking for in a classroom teacher, and how do we assess whether they've got the skills that are capable of being honed and then being honed. And it's not to do with ticking lots of different paperwork
this is
standards.
the trouble. I think there is so much of being a teacher that you just cannot measure it.
Yeah, you can't.
But the government, the schools, whoever it might be, want measurable stuff. So
I think
focus on those to the detriment of everything else.
This isn't a pearl of my own wisdom, Paul, but I remember quite early on watching a programme about education, and a teacher made, I thought, a very pertinent comment, which is that there are some members of staff, some of your colleagues, who are probably verging on severe, sort of social attitudes, and yet are brilliant teachers, but the last person you'd want to invite round for a dinner party. There are others who are absolutely charming, dedicated, hard-working, and they never be able to inspire kids in a million years. And I think it's probably something like, there is some kind of vocational skill there, which can certainly be developed. But if it's not there, it's not there, and some of it is presentation and performance. So I don't know, perhaps teachers should start off as actors.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. Okay, just shifting slightly then onto policy.
Yes.
So to what extent do you follow government policy, not necessarily looking at the government website, but to what extent do you follow it in the news or engage with it in any way?
I don't set myself a target of following it, but obviously I'm aware, for example, of government policy which directly affects the way in which our GCSE and A-level curricula are established, and and why that is, and whether the outcomes which are desired are going to come out of it. And some of that is good. I think actually the GCSE courses I teach now are as good as any that I've ever taught. I'm not some kind of reluctant to change.
Yeah.
And the same is true of A-level. But in terms of broad policy other than my own subject area. I don't do a lot of stuff. So really
just the ones that are going to...
I'm very interested in, for example, the direction Ofsted is taking. I thought it was very interesting when Sir Michael Wilshaw became head of Ofsted, to much probably inevitable teacher misgiving, and I think he turned out to be an absolute star. Because he had been a head teacher, and he pointed out there are more than half a dozen ways of skinning a pig and teaching a good lesson. And I think a lot of Ofsted inspectors had a very salutary experience working for him. As to the direction which it's now taking, it's more difficult to discern, I think.
And then just thinking of, particularly in the last 10 years, say, are there any particular policies that have impacted on you? So whether it be, I don't know, the imposition of teaching British values, or the increase in accountability, the move to academy schools, which may or may not have really affected you. Are there any ones that have really kind of you felt have affected you as a teacher?
Think the increase in accountability, certainly, and the way in which a head of department's sometimes main role is the production of data, and that much more managerial function than, if you like, pedagogical supporting function. And, were I to be applying for a head of department's job now, I'd be very aware it's very different from the one that I applied for back in 1989.
And do you think it's more appealing? Or
to me personally it's less appealing. Right. And the other thing, I think, is the imposition of the teacher's standards. And I had no idea how far-reaching they'd be. And I think, I've always been professional and... being very careful to protect myself from any kind of suggestion of impropriety. But when you look, I was reading of a case the other day where a teacher who turned out not to be well had shown a class an 18 film, and was sacked for it. Now, this film is a 1978 film. Of course, these are GCSE children. But in my early days, a lot was made of the phrase in loco parentis. And one would have pointed out that whether that was advisable or not, and I'm not saying I'd support that decision, is parental guidance, and the teacher is in the role of a parent. It's not against the law to show a 16-year-old, as far as I'm aware, a film. It is a matter of parental choice. And how far you take that. And I just think now that teachers are far more vulnerable to... falling foul of a standard, which in the way that you are establishing relationships with classes and children, it's very easy for words to be taken out of context sometimes. I had a very nasty experience when I was teaching A-level English language for the first time in Colchester, and one of the constituents of the syllabus then was rather controversial. It was taboo language, and so I'd obviously been saying things and exposing these sixth formers to particularly cartoons and things like that in my lesson. And that led to, not as a result of a parental complaint at all, but as a result of an observed lesson. And, it, fortunately in the end it all ended well, because the students were absolutely convinced that they were being taught well, and the matter was on the syllabus. But as to what you could and couldn't say in a lesson became a very serious matter, even if you were referring to
it's on the
written text and on the syllabus.
That's quite strange.
And why are certain Anglo-Saxon words which you hear bellowed out in public, you can't say them, even to analyse why they're being used.
Sure.
So I do think, older teachers like myself, and perhaps even younger ones, aren't aware that a hostile SLT, and I'm not saying at all that we have one here, there are far more ways of insecure management being able to exert considerable pressure on teachers than there used to be, and I'm sure that was never what was intended by the imposition of teacher standards, but that's the way it's become to be used.
That's interesting. And then just thinking about, particularly in your role when you're a middle manager and now, so when you're a middle manager, and you're a middle manager in how many different schools?
Acting head of department in one, and then a head of department in four.
In four?
Yes. That's just three, sorry, so four in all. Three others as a head of department.
Four in
all girls grammar schools, yeah.
So when you had that role, to what extent were you able to interpret policy that came to you and adjust it to your own identity and your own way of thinking? which you've touched on a little bit.
Yes, that again